So now the Feast of the Blessed Trinity, following on from the Feast of Pentecost. There is an ancient recipe which tells you how to create pickles, how to make pickles. It says you have to baptise the cucumbers in vinegar. It's fascinating. We use the word baptise when we immerse a person. That's what the word means, to immerse a person in the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. The Gospel today is from Matthew, and that's exactly what is said. Go out to all nations, baptise them, immerse them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teach them all the commands that I gave you. So notice what we've got here is a double-edged sword. The person has to be immersed in the teaching of Christ, and then they're immersed in the water. Those two things go together. And one would have to say this is probably a correct statement, that of recent times the church, at least in the Western world, hasn't paid too much attention to baptising people in the teaching. But that's what we need to do. We need to baptise, give people time, like those cucumbers needing time to be pickled. So human beings need time to receive the teaching of Christ, to become comfortable with it, become one with it, and then we baptise them. Very interesting piece of history. So what the Christians did is they took words that existed and applied them to their mysteries, because that was the way they sort of best explained to people what was happening. Or on the other hand, they took words that didn't exist and made them up, say like the word agape, which describes the love of Christ, this self-sacrificing love of Christ who laid down his life for us. And that was a word they created, because in the Greek and Latin languages at the time, they didn't quite have a word to describe what had happened as Christ laid down his life and then was resurrected. Most fascinating. The Feast of the Trinity brings us into the mystery and the truth and the reality of the Trinity. And this particular mystery answers two great longings in the human heart. One, that one would never ever be left lonely. Mother Teresa of Calcutta said that loneliness was one of the great diseases of the modern world. Who could argue with that? And the second is that we would lose our identity. We don't want to lose our identity. We want to form our identity. So two great longings or two great fears, you can, depending on which way you want to look at it. So the Blessed Trinity, the teaching is the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are one in the sense of unity, but the Father is not the Son, and the Son is not the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is not the Father. Each of the persons are God in their own right, and yet somehow they're a mystery of love in the Trinity. So there's this unity, which means that they're not on their own, so that's important. And then secondly, because the persons are not each other, because they're distinct from each other yet one with each other, they have their identity formed completely. So the practical implication is that human beings are formed in the image and likeness of God. That's how we want to progress our life, by living like the Trinity, living at one with people, one with God obviously, but one with people. And that sort of fights the whole loneliness syndrome, the scourge of loneliness. And yet we want to be ourselves. It was Thomas Merton that said in Seeds of Contemplation remarkably that the reason people don't become saints is they refuse to be themselves. Well, of course, Merton is not saying just do anything you like. He's just saying we have to be like Christ, but we've got to do it in the way that we can do it in our created existence. We're unique. Very helpful, I think. Don't you think? That the Trinity answers these two great longings to form our identity, to be one with others, or answers the two great fears to lose our identity, to be lost in other people, and to be left on our own. So the Trinity has tremendous implications for our ordinary everyday life.